Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, depending where this program finds you. My name is Sam Koenig, and I'm with American Friends of Bar-Ilan University. Please remain muted. Without further ado, I would like to turn the floor to Jane Stern-Labelle, who will begin the program formally.
Good morning, good afternoon. I'm Jane Stern-Labelle, Vice Chairman of Bar-Ilan University's Board of Trustees. On behalf of Bar-Ilan University, the American Friends of Bar-Ilan, and the Rachman Center, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this special gathering in commemoration of the 12th yahrzeit of our beloved Rabbi Rachman. He gave us so much to remember and treasure during his years as president and then chancellor of Bar-Ilan, a leader with so much depth and heart and true understanding of Bar-Ilan's mission. On the occasion of his 90th birthday, the American Friends established an endowment for the Ruth and Emanuel Rachman Center for the advancement of the status of women. We can all be so proud of the center's achievements as we look to its future together. Thank you for being with us. And now I hand the microphone over to Joseph Rachman.
Thank you. First off, I want to thank my daughter, Sophia Hirschman, who, when asked to organize a Bar-Ilan event in her community in Riverdale, wisely reoriented this to be nationwide in this age of Zoom. And I'm grateful to all of my children, cousins, nieces, and nephews, and my brothers who helped to promote this event, and to the amazing number of participants who are online today. I especially want to single out my great niece, my father's great granddaughter, Jordana Grunfeld, for her effort. I would like to briefly note what I believe was my father's motivation in creating the Rachman Center. My guess is that many people think that it is because he was liberal, which he was. But there is a key to understanding my father that few seem to remember. He loved the halakha. He loved Jewish law. It was the backbone of the Jewish people in 2,000 years of exile. And studying with Dad, he would emphasize how in practice the halakha functioned. People observed the halakha because it worked in their societies. They were able to live in their societies. This functional approach came easily to him because he was not only a rabbi and not only a lawyer, but he had a doctorate in political science from Columbia University. And Dad saw that the halakha was no longer functioning effectively in the area of the status of women, which meant that within the bounds of halakha, advancements were needed. It was his profound belief in the centrality of the halakha to Jewish life that led to the creation of the, and here I shall use the full name, lest Mom's critical role be forgotten, the Ruth and Emanuel Rachman Center for the advancement of the status of women. And now I turn you over to my daughter, Sophia Hirschman, who will introduce our speaker.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sophia Rachman Hirschman, and it is a privilege to introduce Professor Ruth Halpern Kadari, who was handpicked some 20 years ago by my grandfather, Rabbi Emanuel Rachman, as the founding and to this day, the continuing director of the Ruth and Emanuel Rachman Center for the Advancement of the Status of Women. Professor Halpern Kadari is an expert on family law and international women's rights. Amongst her singular honors, she was a member of the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women and served as vice chair of that committee for several years. In 2018, she was named on Apolitical's 100 Most Influential People in Gender Policy Around the World. She is a renowned speaker and academic as well as in professional forums, and has served on several occasions as an expert witness on Israeli family law and international tribunals. She also served for 5 years in a national role as the chair of the advisory committee to the Authority for the Advancement of Women at the Prime Minister's office. And during all this, she has built and led with great success one of my grandfather's legacies, the center which we are highlighting today. I've shortened her achievements since all of us are anxious to hear from Professor Halperin Kadari. One last thing, I ask that you write any questions you may have in the chat. The event host will receive them and share as many as possible during the Q&A period following the end of the professor's presentation. And now I give you Professor Ruth Halperin Kadari.
Thank you so much, Sophia. Before I start, let me do the share screen, the first task of the tricky Zoom presentation. Okay. Let me just, give me a nod if you can all see the title of the presentation. Okay, so we are all set. So it's really a very, very emotional moment for me. It is Rabbi Reckman's 12th Yortzeit today, this time of the year. And it is in fact, just as you said before, Joseph, 20 years after his 90th birthday, and his really remarkable decision to take all the funds that were raised in honor of his 90th birthday and allocate them for the founding of the Reckman Center at Bar-Ilan University Faculty of Law. And I'm really, truly grateful to Joseph Reckman, to Sophia Hirschman, to Jordana Grunfeld, and the whole Reckman family and the American Friends of Bar-Ilan University for so beautifully organizing and planning this event and giving me this special opportunity to pay tribute to the memory of the late Rabbi Reckman. In the next half hour or so, I want us to take a sort of a journey together and get to the heart, to the essence of Rabbi Reckman's legacy, to his special way of looking at halacha and looking at progress, particularly as it relates to women's rights, and to share with you some key ways in which we at the Reckman Center believe that we are really following in his footsteps and fulfilling his legacy. So first of all, why did we choose this title? I think that for most people who are in this virtual Zoom room, the title is almost self-explanatory. It's a common knowledge that there is an inherent tension between progressive ideals and Jewish law, almost a common wisdom. But just as much as this tension is clear to so many people, there are many, many of us who strive on a daily basis to ease it, or if you will, to close the gap. And if there ever were one individual whose personality, whose leadership, whose writing, whose whole life, in fact, was dedicated to this very goal, it was Rabbi Emanuel Reckman. And I want to start our journey today with recounting what I see as a watershed moment in Rabbi Reckman's public and rabbinic career. This was his open disagreement, even confrontation, with Harav Soloveitchik, the Gdol Hador of the last century, whom Rabbi Reckman himself, in fact, regarded as his own rabbi. So I want to take you to this piece, which Rabbi Reckman published in 1984 at the Shema Journal of Jewish Responsibility. And I want to tell you what was behind this short but extremely brave article. Rabbi Reckman was looking for what Lou Greenberg, in fact, years later called a systemic solution to the Aguna problem. And one of the leads that he took was actually quite simple. He said the following: the marital tie is also a contract. And for a contract, you need the agreement of both parties. But if a woman had known in advance that her husband was, in fact, let's say, a violent man, maybe even a pedophile, all sorts of, personality problems, she would never have agreed to marry him. So the marriage contract was, in fact, based on a faulty agreement and could be voided. So this is very legalistic, very halachic, very simple and very reasonable. There was only one problem with this construction. And the problem was a Talmudic presumption that basically said that a woman would always prefer marriage on being alone. Tav lemeitav tandu milemeitav armelu. A woman always prefers marriage to none, any kind of marriage to none. Now, Rabbi Reckman knew that this could no longer be the case. It may have been true years ago during the Talmudic era, but it cannot hold in our times. And so he started advancing this line of thinking and even wrote about it in his book, One Man's Judaism, which he published in 1970. When Rabbi Soloveitchik heard of that, he gave a very radical drasha speech in the 1975 RCA, Rabbinical Council of America Convention. And there he stated that that Talmudic presumption was in fact an existential truth. And now I'm quoting from what Harav Soloveitchik said at that convention, and he later published it. So I'm quoting, the chazaka, meaning the presumption, is not based on sociological factors, but on a pasuk in Bereshit, and thy desire shall be to thy husband. It is a metaphysical curse rooted in the feminine personality. Ve'el ishech tshukatech, that's the destiny of women, and that makes that presumption an existential one. It is metaphysical curse rooted in the feminine personality, end of quote. Now, Rabbi Reckman was faced with an untenable dilemma. Harav Soloveitchik, Gdol Ador, whom he, Rabbi Reckman, regarded as his own rabbi, was clearly repudiating him. But he knew that to stay true to his own way, he must face this challenge. He did not retract. He argued with Rabbi Soloveitchik. And this is the background to this short yet very, very brave piece in the Shema Journal, where he unfolds this story and openly criticizes Rabbi Soloveitchik's approach. And he also tells how Rabbi Soloveitchik responded to this challenge. And let me now try to go back to the previous slide. Here it is, where you can see this quote, and this in the third bullet, it's a quote of what Rabbi Soloveitchik told Rabbi Reckman as recounted by Rabbi Reckman in the Shema article. So Rabbi Soloveitchik said the following, Reckman, you may be right, I may be wrong, you view the halacha historically, and I like to view it meta-historically. And this is the crux of the matter. This is the heart of the matter. Just like Rabbi Soloveitchik said to Rabbi Reckman, you view halacha historically, this is the view of halacha and his methodology was historical. It's the opposite of static. And this was a seminal moment for Rabbi Reckman. And he would talk about it years later. It never really left him. I myself heard it from him each time that we met. The argument and the publication of the article really capture his legacy. This is where he took his own direction, and not surprisingly, it was around the Aguna issue, which became his life mission to solve. So that's why this is where I chose to start our journey today. And the next stop on our journey, if I can just get
audio. So they should mute.
Okay.
Nobody's talking.
Yeah, I think everybody's having trouble. You have voices in the background.
Can you hear me now?
We can just get one to unmute, please. Thank you very much.
The speaker is muted, I think, and the other people are
Okay, I unmuted myself. Sam, if I can ask you, if when you control the mute and unmute, so please make sure that when you unmute everybody, when you mute everybody, then unmute me, okay? Because I'm having troubles navigating between the slideshow and the mute
No problem.
button. Okay, thank you. Okay, so now we're at our next station in the journey. So if I said before that that episode of the confrontation between Rabbi Reckman and Rabbi Soloveitchik was the starting point, which really depicts Rabbi Reckman's legacy in action, our next stop on the journey is this very beautiful quote taken from a talk that Rabbi Reckman gave much later in his life after the Reckman Center was already established, and where he talked about the Reckman Center. And let me read it out loud because it's so beautiful. Justice, I feel, is the essence and heart of Judaism. I fought and still am fighting for what I regard as the dignity and integrity of the halachic system, which too many Jews and rabbis are abusing. It is there that women become the sufferers because men alone determine Jewish law. So these are his own words, capturing in 3 strong sentences, powerful sentences, everything that he stood for. And what I want to do now is to take this quote and see how each part in it really reflects another piece in the puzzle, and how together they present Rabbi Reckman's legacy, which serves for us as a kind of a lighthouse. So first of all, there's justice, but there is no justice without justice for women too. Justice only for men is no justice. Then we move on to fighting. And when I think about fighting, from the perspective of Rabbi Reckman's life and legacy, it always comes to me this pasuk, Im ein ani li mili v'im lo achshav ei matai. If it is not for me, then for whom? And if not now, then when? This is what stood behind him establishing the Beit Din leBayot Agunot, against all odds and against all the criticism, where he stood against those who actually threatened to take his semicha away from him. And he was willing to sacrifice very high personal price. And what you can also see in here is engaging in activism, understanding that it's not enough just to talk or to write or to teach or to preach. One must also do, one must engage in action. And this understanding, he also handed over to us at the Reckman Center, because activism was very much part and parcel of his vision for the Reckman Center. And then we move on to the halachic system. And we already heard from Joseph at the introduction. And if we read Rabbi Reckman's that short piece in the Shema journal, you can see there how he stressed that he too, just like Rabbi Soloveitchik, was weaving his way and solution from within the system, caring and preserving the dignity and the integrity of the halachic system. Then we move on to suffering. Now, this concept of suffering, really, you have to understand that he was way before his time in understanding that the suffering of women and their predicament is actually caused by the system itself, by a structured injustice that must be amended. And then finally, again, he was way before his time in understanding that women must be at the forefront of the solution, making their voices heard, be part of the conversation, part of the debate. And that's how we should view the founding of the Rachman Center and requesting a woman. Fortunately, I have the privilege that he asked me to head the Rachman Center. So that's the concept of women's voices and women's place and women's leadership. And just think about it, in his 90th birthday, a rabbi celebrating his 90th birthday and deciding to establish this center for the advancement of the status of women. So this takes us, 1 minute. This takes us to what I said in the beginning. I want to share with you now some of the key milestones that we at the Rachman Center are really achieving. I'm just checking to see how I'm doing in terms of time, but it's fine. Okay, so the first subject that I want to talk about is actually seems a bit remote from halachic issues and from the Aguna problem, but as I will try to explain, it is all really weaved together. So the 1973 law on the property relations law, spousal property relations law, actually said that a woman can have her share in the marital property only after there is a get, only after the divorce has taken place. And I think it's obvious to everybody who understands the dynamic of the Jewish divorce and the get issue, that this gives enormous power to the hands of the man, of the husband, who can, by withholding the get, actually withhold the property, the wife's share in the marital property, to withhold it from her. And it took 25 years for that amendment to actually pass. And it was only thanks to us at the Rachman Center who led this fight, who led this battle and managed to create this amendment to the property relations law and have the distribution of property take place regardless of the get. And another issue that has to do with property, with finances, which actually is so crucial for any woman's liberty and ability to start a new page in her life, has to do with the decision that the Rabbinical Court took a few years ago in refusing to give a woman who had allegedly had an affair with another man towards the end of her marriage, and never mind that her husband also had affairs, you know, the asymmetry here is blatant. But because she allegedly had this affair, the Rabbinical Court refused her share, refused to give her her share in the marital property. And an appeal to the High Court of Justice, to the secular High Court of Justice, actually upheld this Rabbinical Court decision. And again, it was only us at the Rachman Center who spotted this extremely, extremely difficult case and understood the harm that it could cause to so many women in the country. And we brought a request for a rehearing at the High Court of Justice, which was granted. We argued the case few months ago during the COVID-19 hearings, you know, everybody with their masks on in the High Court of Justice, and we're actually now waiting for the result. So moving on, another High Court petition, which we just brought last month, is to allow women to serve as wedding officiators. And here we mean to serve as wedding officiators, again, within the system, as part of those wedding ceremonies which are recognized by the Central Rabbinate Authority. And halachically, there's absolutely no problem with that. However, the rabbinical system, rabbinical administrative system in Israel refuses to open up this position for women. And this is the next stop in our battle to have more women included within the system. So, looking ahead in the future, the way that we term it is we have a petition which is still in the drawer waiting for the time to ripe, to the time that we can actually bring that petition to have women serve, in fact, as dayanot, as religious judges in the rabbinical courts. But there's still time for that. But in the meantime, what we have already succeeded is this third bullet here, to allow women to serve as legal advisors for dayanim within the state rabbinical court system. And all this is part of our ongoing battle to have women be part of the conversation. Just as I said before, quoting from Rabbi Reckman, be part of the conversation, sit around the table. So this fourth bullet really shows, again, this methodology. We managed to have the law which states the construction of the committee to select dayanim, to select religious judges. We managed to amend it so that there is, in fact, a numerical quota that secures 4 places on the committee for the selection of dayanim for women. And it actually worked. We really managed to influence by that the selection of the future dayanim, and I can talk about that more later in the Q&A part. Now, the next methodology that I want to describe is one that I call exposing the reality. A crucial step in every battle for social change is first to make people aware of what's actually going on. And for years, we have heard of a new, but it wasn't actually new, like new old tool that the rabbinical courts resurrected. And that tool was a retroactive invalidation of divorces. I know it's hard to understand when first time you hear it, but it's actually canceling the divorce, canceling the get. When does it happen? It happens in those cases where a woman dared to turn to the civil family court in, let's say, cases where she wanted to raise very, very low child support payment to which she agreed before because she had no choice. She had to agree to that in return to the divorce, in return to the get. And then afterwards, she wants the help of the civil system to raise this very low child support payment, like $200 for a child for a month. That's a true example from a case that we had at the Reckman Center. But we knew it was happening, but the Rabbinical Court Administration denied it wholeheartedly. They said, you're inventing, you're making up, it's not happening, it's not true. So then we have our publication of Hadin Vehadayan, which is another thing that we're doing at the Reckman Center, publishing rabbinical courts decisions that do not get published anywhere else. And here you can see an example of a brochure, and I underlined those subjects of get cancellation, get conditions, get cancellations. We started publishing these cases that reached us, whether we presented in them or not. And then the Rabbinical Court Administration had no choice but admit, yes, it is happening. This unbelievable, unprecedented, unheard of phenomena is actually happening. And that really allowed us to bring cases and to save these women, to have them regain their divorces and regain their freedoms. And the final and very powerful exercise of exposing is the uncovering of the scope of get extortion and get abuse. You know that the $1 million question is actually, how many agunot are there out there? But that's a question to which there's no answer, because an aguna is not a formal status, right? It's not that one day you get an email or a letter in the mail telling you, congratulations, you've just become an aguna. It's not that. And that's actually not even the proper question to ask. Our argument is that the right question, the real issue, is the effect of these inherent structural unequal power relations. It's the question of how the enormous power that the man has over the woman, the husband has over the wife, that allows him to make extortions, to get concessions, to have her give up all her rights relating to children or marital property rights, all rights in return to the get. It's the question of the phenomena of the extortion and the get abuse that goes on a daily basis within the rabbinical court system. And so to expose this phenomena and understand its ripple effect, we at the Rachman Center, together with a very prestigious survey company in Israel, conducted actually twice a survey among Jewish women in Israel, 25 years and over, who at one point in their life had undergone divorce. And we asked them whether at any point within the divorce process, they actually were threatened by being refused the get or having to give up their rights and were extorted in return to the get. Now, this survey is a very, very large one, and I do not have, it's a whole other conversation and a whole other lecture, but here I just wanted to present you with the main findings. We conducted it in 2013 and then in 2017, and the result is really, the numbers are really shocking. It's more than a third of the women who had undergone divorce in Israel at one point were threatened or were under explicit get refusal unless they concede, unless they give up their rights. And the significance of uncovering the magnitude of this phenomena cannot be overstated. So this really showed us, like a glimpse of the milestones, as I said, in our work at the Rachman Center. And what I want to do now is a kind of a summary of all the methodologies and all the ways in which we work at the center, and what makes us really unique in comparison with other organizations or with other academic centers. So this last slide is the Rachman Center in its methodology. First of all, we believe in law as a tool for social change. And the rest of the building blocks here, they all show different dimensions of the work that we do, under the understanding that what we deal with is really a multidimensional problem. And a multidimensional problem requires a multidimensional methodology. So first of all, as I already stressed throughout the talk, we worked from within the system and at the same time also outside the system. Because the only way to succeed in making progress within the system is coming from within, is understanding halacha, understanding the Orthodox community and engaging with the system. But at the same time, with the examples that short examples that I gave you, we're working also from the outside. We're engaging with all the civil legal issues that also impede on the advancement of women and obstruct gender equality. Then the next building block is the combination and the synergy of top down and bottom up. Bottom up is the representation of countless women. Each year, we fully represent, we give full legal representation to almost 50 women throughout their encounters with the legal system, the rabbinical court, the civil family court, the district court, Court of Appeal, High Court of Justice, and we take these cases and we work to save the women and save the children and achieve precedents. And that's the change from bottom up. And we also work from the top down. That's the legal amendments. That's our department for advocacy and policy. That's the work that we do at the Knesset on the daily basis and with all the relevant government ministries. Then the next building block is the synergy between academia and activism. And here I think there's the parallel with Rabbi Reckman, his rabbinic work and his activism. So that's what we are also trying to do. We have very impressive number at the Faculty of Law of experts in family law and in halacha, and we have the students, and we have the wonderful, wonderful legal team, which you're going to see in a moment in the next slide. And we join the forces together doing the academic, scholarly research work, conferences, publications, writing articles, writing papers, together with grassroots organization activism like another NGO civil society organization. And last on the list is the synergy between the legal work and the emotional support that we provide to our clients. And that's a development within the last 5 years of the Reckman Center, where we joined forces, where we benefited from a very generous grant from the European Union Instrument on Democracy and Human Rights. And we combined the work with the School of Social Work. That's the advantage of us being located in the university at Bar-Ilan University, to offer the clients the emotional support on top of the legal representation and the legal support that we give them. And all this together is our way to create change. And I'm reaching the end of my presentation. I could not stop myself from putting this very, very emotional picture. It's the last picture, the last photo that I had with Rabbi Reckman in loving memory. This picture is very blurry because it was taken with a very old Nokia cell phone, you know, the first cell phones that were around in the 90s, in the previous century, long before smartphones were even imagined. And of course, who could have imagined that this would be the last time that I see Rabbi Reckman? And I really have to admit that there's almost no week that passes without me asking myself, what would he have said? What would he have liked me to do in this case, in that case, in this conflict, in this dilemma? And I want to show you now this picture of the incredible team that we have at the Reckman Center, and really make you understand that without the true work together of all these people, the Rachman Center has been truly blessed throughout the years with the best possible professional, qualified, committed, and most of all, team with a strong sense of justice, of real justice, for the sake of women, for the sake of children, and for the sake of the whole society together. And I truly believe that Rabbi Rachman, from wherever he can watch us, I really believe that he draws nachat from this incredible and amazing team that tries to follow his footsteps. So going back to where we started this journey with the question of, can progressive ideals and Jewish law coexist? I hope that I managed to convince you that Rabbi Rachman's legacy encapsulates the complexity of our title, and the work of the Rachman Center shows how the two can and must coexist. And in carrying on Rabbi Rachman's legacy, we strive to carry on his vision for Tikkun Olam. Thank you for listening, and I'll be very, very happy to take questions. I'm just trying to do the stop share now. I said that Zoom lectures can be a bit tricky. So bear with me, a few more seconds, but I think I can already hand the floor over to Leah. Leah, you can perhaps start, and
great.
I'll just stop the share screen.
Thank you, Professor Halpern Kadari. Your lecture was very interesting. We now have a few minutes for questions and answers. And in order to respect everyone's busy schedules, we will end all questions in about 10 minutes by 10:55 a.m. East Coast time and move to closing remarks. For those of you who want to stay longer, Professor Halpern Kadari will stay online for a short time after the closing remarks for any additional questions or comments. So let's take the first question, and please feel free to add additional questions in the chat. I will be reading them and Professor Halpern Kadari will be answering. How does the Rachman Center's work differ from other women's organizations in Israel that also fight for the rights of agunot? Is our first question.
Okay, thank you. So should I answer the questions as they come one by one? Okay. So there are, of course, numerous organizations, very important ones, who are doing really good work, important work, and without the combined work of all of us together, nothing would have changed in Israel, but believe me. But the special attribute of the Rachman Center is that we, as I showed you in one of the last slides, we look at the issue in a comprehensive manner. We represent not only in the rabbinical court, we do not only deal with the aguna problem with the women who cannot get their divorces. We represent women throughout their encounters on all the issues that come up in times of marital crisis and marital breakdown and divorce. So that means representing in child custody cases, in visitations, in child support cases, in matrimonial property cases. We take cases to the High Court of Justice. And we also do the advocacy work, not only the representation, which I called from the bottom up, but we also do the advocacy work in trying to change the policy and trying to change the laws from the top bottom. And the combination of the academic work together with the legal representation and the activism is also what unites us. You know, I like to say, Sophia mentioned that I've also served on the UN Committee on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. And I really had the privilege of seeing what goes on in terms of women's rights in 180 countries throughout the world. In those 12 years in which I was on the UN committee. And it wasn't just the officials of the countries who reported to the committee, it was also civil society and NGOs, non-governmental organizations. And I really had not encountered any organization that works in the same special manner, in the special synergy, in the unique synergy that we do our work at the Rachman Center. So I think I can really pride myself in saying we are really unique.
Great, thank you. Can you discuss acceptance of your efforts in the various Orthodox populations is a question we received.
So that's a challenge. That's really a challenge. I think that we are in a very interesting moment in the life of Judaism in general and Orthodoxy in particular, where feminism within Orthodoxy is truly advancing and is making changes within the community, within so many communities. So you cannot really separate what we at the Rachman Center are doing from other processes that are ongoing within whole Orthodox communities in Israel and throughout the world. The participatory minyanim, egalitarian minyanim, which maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago, but even 10 years ago, were still, only here and there scattered. They're now a real movement. So the ideas that we advance, such as the prenuptial agreements, such as various solutions to the Aguna problem from within halacha, such as the space for women within the rabbinical courts administration as the legal advisors to dayanim, or our appeal to the High Court of Justice to have a woman head the rabbinical court administration, to be the CEO, mankalit of the rabbinical courts. All these were probably novel ideas 10 years ago, but they did catch on. And we now see them being advanced by all other organizations within the Orthodox community as well.
Thank you. Another question, what is the process for a divorce in Israel? And what is the interaction between the civil court and the Beit Din? It's a great question.
So it's a question for, that's the subject of my whole year family law course, right? So I'll try to do it in 30 seconds. So there is no civil marriage and divorce in Israel, right? The only way that a person can get married or divorced in Israel is through the religious system. And it doesn't matter whether you are a believer, non-believer, atheist, the religion into which you were born is the religion in which you have to conduct your marriage and then your divorce. The civil court has concurrent jurisdiction on all, concurrent meaning like parallel jurisdiction, on all other matters which are, which come together with the divorce. So it's the property issues, the child, parents and children issues, and any other issues except for the divorce. The divorce you can only get at the rabbinical court. And that's where the extortion comes into play, because even though the civil system may be much more egalitarian and non-discriminatory, although it has its problems as well, believe me, we have enough work on our hands vis-a-vis the civil system as well. But even if a woman can have her property rights at the civil court, if she still did not get her divorce, if the husband made claims and made demands in return for the divorce and the rabbinical court sided with him, which happens all too often, then all the rights in the civil system are in vain. And that's the interplay, that's the extortion, that's what we call the get abuse.
Thank you. To what extent do you engage with the diaspora agunot?
So first of all, we would actually like more cooperation, more collaboration, because the problems that we're facing are the same problems. The problems against staunch rabbinical, sometimes fundamental perspective system, a system that finds it very difficult to be empathic for women, to understand women, and to use the tools that are within the halachic system, just like we saw Rabbi Reckman's vision in the 70s. It's a very similar pattern, both in Israel and in the diaspora. So we exchange information, we participate in conferences. The survey that I showed before, I'd like to mention that the second survey that we conducted in 2017 was in conjunction with the International Beit Din. I already mentioned Blue Greenberg, and I want to acknowledge her contribution to the establishment of the International Beit Din and the collaboration with them on conducting that survey. And I presented it in an international conference on the Aguna problem. So there is cooperation, there is collaboration, and I really hope that we can do more of that together.
How confident are you that the solutions which exist within halakha to resolve the problem of the aguna will be used?
I am confident. It's just a question of time. And it's, as I said in one of those slides, it's an uphill battle. Sometimes it's one step forward, 2 steps backwards. Sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 1 step backwards. But we are advancing. We are making progress. It's too slow. And we may not even see it in our lifetime. We should see it in our lifetime, but I'm not sure that we will. I'm very sad to say that Israeli politics do not help in advancing progress and in advancing solutions. The distortion that the political system gives to ultra-Orthodox parties that back up the most regressive ideologies and approaches of the state rabbinical court is something that I wish we could overcome. I wish the political system would be different. There would be separation between the religion and the politics in Israel, because I really think that all these hamper, to use Rabbi Reckman's words, the integrity of the halachic system. This is what actually works against the integrity of the halachic system.
Thank you. We'll take one last question. What is the Rachman Center's vision and goals for the next few years?
So our vision and our goal is, first of all, to be able to continue in what we're doing and to expand. We are now in, like the rest of the world, in an era, a very difficult one, of COVID-19. And I'm sure this will be no news to any of you around here, to hear that the calls to our helpline and appeals for women, from women to help increased tremendously in these past few months by almost 50%. The severity of the cases, the complexity of the cases, the severity of violence in the cases that get to us have all really increased. And I hope that we will manage to really give the proper response to all those who need, and be able to expand our staff and have more people join our wonderful, wonderful staff at the Rachman Center. For the long run, I hope that at some point there will be no need for the work to get to those solutions. I hope that the Department for the Aguna problem will no longer be needed there. But I really hope that we will also be able to expand our international work and work with other organizations, not just Jewish organizations, but other human rights organizations and women's rights organizations out of Israel. I am a strong believer in the slogan of sisterhood, and sisterhood is universal. And again, on my years on the UN committee, I saw how so many issues are common, not just to us in Israel, but to so many women around the world. And I believe that at the Rachman Center, we found a very, very successful formula on how to work and how to operate. And I hope to be able to spread the word around the world. So that's also part of the vision.
Great. Thank you so much, Professor Halperin-Kodari. I now pass the microphone over to family member Jordana Grunfeld for closing remarks.
Thank you, Professor Halperin-Kodari, for that most interesting discussion. And thank you, everyone who has joined us today. I'd like to offer a very special thank you to the Blackman Foundation. Their generosity recognizes the Rachman Center's growth and the importance of its work, and it will enable the organization to move to a new facility. As Leah said, I'm Jordana Grunfeld, and I'm one of Rabbi Rachman's 25 great-grandchildren. If there's something I've come to understand about my great-grandfather's approach to Judaism, it's that Halakha's purpose was not to keep us mired in the past, but rather to serve as a guidepost for how we might conduct a Jewish life in the future, a future with modern demands, sensibilities, and values. Not everyone has the chance to meet his or her great-grandparents, and I was fortunate enough to have mine in my life well into my late teenage years. It is because of this gift of condensed generations that I had a great-grandfather who shaped my perspectives on Judaism, activism, and service to one's community. Now, as the members of my generation within the extended family begin to raise their own, we think about the ways great-grandpa's influence formed our views, and we each try in our own way to instill in our kids the same deep appreciation for a Jewish life that he so naturally inculcated within us. It is always a balance, but great-grandpa's forward-thinking approach never fails to provide the best compass to guide our Jewish journey. We are very grateful for his example. The formal presentation has now concluded, but if anyone would like to stay online longer for questions, Professor Halperin-Kodari will make herself available for the next 15 minutes. The event has also been recorded, and a link will be sent to all participants. Thank you again for joining us today.
Hey, George. Hey, Soph. Great job.
Hello, Ruth, can I ask you a question? This is Esther Mack.
Hi, Esther.
How are you?
Where are you in the world now?
I'm in California. I've been here for the past 10 years, but my heart is in Jerusalem. What do you think about the notion of challenging the Rabbanut under the nation-state law to resolve cases of agunot in the diaspora? In other words, it's the inverse of the power of the Rabbanut, which I know that the Rachman Center and other organizations would wish to, undermine. But I'm thinking in terms of, since they have this power, it's overwhelming, it's far-reaching throughout the diaspora. put it to them. They must save Jewish women in distress throughout the diaspora.
So first of all, they do have this power in the rabbinical law jurisdiction, in the Chok Shiput Batei Din Rabbanim Nisuim V'Gerushin. There was an amendment in 2004, and then it was actually expanded.
17.
And the last change was in 2017 to expand the jurisdiction so that
right.
you can handle cases where the couple do not even have any connection to Israel, but the husband is caught in Israel and wants to exit the country, and then they can get hold of him and use this. So I guess you're asking about situations where there is absolutely no connection.
Correct. That's right. The husband will never step foot in Israel. Don't they have an obligation to save Jews all over the world?
Still jabbering on the phone, that one.
Yes, I know. Very animated.
Mute everyone. Sorry about that.
I'm torn. I'm really torn here because experience shows that the more power you give to the state rabbinical courts, the more, and I'm really sorry to say that, but I have no choice to say that the more abuse of power they may do. Sometimes they do use it for the good, but too often they abuse power that they're given. And I'm really, and I don't think, I personally, my own views of Judaism and the place of Israel within the Jewish world, I don't think the Israel state rabbinical courts should be regarded as the saviors of all Jewish women around the world. I think they're just one component within a huge overall universal scheme of Jewish congregations and Jewish communities. And actually, I do not like the higher position that they strive to achieve. The most recent enterprise to have this kind of what's it called in English, like genetic clearinghouse for Jewish origins, to know who is a Jew and who is not a Jew. I don't like it. I don't think it's justified. I think it really distorts the evolution of the Jewish world, the Jewish process, and the way that Judaism should organically develop. So I sympathize with your question, but I don't think this is a direction that I would really advance.
I wanted to say, Ruth, just as always, brilliant and inspiring and very, very, very rich in content. And I have an emotional reaction to listening to you tonight. And having had the privilege of growing up with Rabbi Rachman, a very close family friend, and also being so influenced by his thought and his philosophy. And I can't help but thinking that, how proud he would be of where you have taken this, how proud he would be tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Blue. I really, really appreciate these warm words. Thank you. And you know how much I admire you and your work, and being such a role model for all of us, pioneering in the religious Orthodox feminism. So we're all part of this ongoing endeavor. Thank you.
Professor, in New York law, we have the Get Law. Shari Rachman, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see where you are on the screen.
Sorry.
Yeah, okay, go on.
In New York, we have the GET law where the plaintiff is required, if they sue for divorce, they are required to do everything in their power to religiously release the other party, including giving a get, and the civil courts can hold them in contempt if they don't do that. Is there any thoughts of or ability to enact something of that, something similar to that in Israel? And it's not without its faults here, but it's a help.
Right. Well, the truth is that in Israel, rabbinical courts have much more power than that. Right. You need the GET law in New York, and you need similar laws in other jurisdictions in the world. And there are similar initiatives in Canada, in Australia, in the UK, in France. There is a different methodology, but you need that when you have civil divorces, and then you find recalcitrant husbands or just careless husbands who do not care to cooperate with securing the religious divorce and leaving their wives married within the eyes of the halacha, and though unable to religiously remarry. But in Israel, since you do not have the civil marriage and the civil divorce, it doesn't come up. And the rabbinical courts have powers to issue sanctions, quite severe sanctions against recalcitrant husbands, starting from withholding the driver's license to actually put them in jail. But as we showed in one of our publications at the Rachman Center, statistical analysis of legal data and other data, we showed that they only use this power in a very limited number of cases, and they could use it in much larger number of cases. And this is again one of the faults of the system.
All right, are there any more questions? One more.
I have a technical question for
yes.
Just brief. Yes. Does that mean that get refusal is quasi-criminal in Israel? In other words, is this under the penal law that they grant sanctions, or is it contempt of court, civil contempt of court? Is there hope to make get refusal a crime under the Israeli penal law?
No, I'm smiling because that's exactly the subject of a doctorate student of mine. That's the topic of her thesis, and that's the research that she's conducting as we speak, to show that it should in fact become a criminal offense. So your question, Esther, is anything but technical. It's a very substantive question. Right now, it is not criminal. And this actually impedes, for example, such cases as we had at the Rachman Center. One of our clients, I can say her name because the story was very publicized, so there's no breach of privacy. It was Gez affair, Oded Gez. He broke a restraining order and escaped Israel. And there could be no use of, we could not file to have him, what's the term for that, extradite, to have him extradite to Israel, because the convention, the extradition convention, requires that the whatever reason one state asks for the extradition of one of its citizens, that it be a criminal offense. And get refusal is not a criminal offense. So that's just one case where it could have helped. But right now, those sanctions that I spoke about, and even the jail orders, committing a recalcitrant husband to jail, is similar. It's akin to a contempt of court in the legal construction, and not a criminal. It does not belong in the criminal law realm.
Okay, are there any last questions before we say good morning, good afternoon, good night? No more?
I think Esther Tager.
I just wanted to say on behalf of the UK contingent, and I see someone else from the UK, thank you very much for what we knew would be a riveting and fascinating talk. And, you know, I've been involved in the issue of Argonaut for more years than I care to recall. And sometimes I feel very pessimistic that there won't be any real change within my lifetime. There are steps within the UK, but it's always by means of resolving the issue through the civil procedure. And as Ruth knows very well, something that we both feel very strongly about, and Blue as well. I don't want to misquote Blue, but I think what she said was, where there is a halachic will, there is a halachic way to resolve these questions. And certainly we all know that the solutions exist, but they fail to use them.
Right. When there is a rabbinic will, there is halachic way.
A rabbinic will, sorry. Yeah, I said I might misquote.
There is a halachic way, and we need more women within the system to advance these halachic way, and we'll get there.
Thank you.
Okay, I think I don't want to miss anybody. So if anybody has a question, speak up now or forever hold your peace. All right. Then again, thank you to the Rachman family. Thank you to Professor Halperin Kadari. Thank you to everyone who made this amazing event possible. And thank you all for being with us. If you would like to find out more information about the Rachman Center, you can, of course, visit our website. Everyone will be receiving a link to our website in an email either later today or tomorrow. And I wish you all a good Sunday.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you all very, very much.
Bye.